the few new people that we have in the room. So my name is Rob Haig. I am Senior City Planner with Community Planning and Development in the Regulatory Planning team, and I'm the Project Manager of the Unlocking Housing Choices Project, and I'll pass it to my left.
Hi everyone, I'm Cheney Bostic with Studio Seed, and I'm an urban designer working on the zoning testing for these concepts.
And we are recording the meeting, so that is underway, and I just wanted to make you aware of that. Then I'll pass it to Arlene.
Hi everyone, Arlene Taniwaki with Arden Land Use Economics and running the financial feasibility models for this project.
Start by Joe Green, I'm an associate planner with the city.
I'm Kyle Dalton, I'm the city's regulatory planning.
I'm Heidi Agler, I'm from Root Policy Research. We're supporting the financial feasibility analysis.
I'm Carly Bouts, also with Root Policy Research.
Andrew Webb, CPD, part of the project team.
Mary Kate Zukowitz, I'm with Harvey Park Community Organization.
Rod Kaczynski, I'm with the SUNY Land Use Committee.
Kevin Flynn, Southwest Denver's District 2 City Council.
Alicia Kwan Hammett, Planning Board.
Alicia Kwan, Denver Housing Authority.
Corey Whitaker, Habitat for Humanity.
Lucas Hagen, Neighborhood Development Collaborative.
Carson Bryant, I'm with East Colfax Community Collective.
Erin Cuthbertson, Athmar Park resident.
Joel Noble in Curtis Park.
Lucia Brown, I'm a YIMBY.
Alejandra Castañeda, I live in the Berkeley neighborhood and I represent House Burton residents.
Angela Hutton Hall with the Denver Metro Association of Realtors, and I also live in the far northeast in Green Valley Ranch.
Awesome. And we have some folks online too. So let's see, we'll start with Brad. How about you go first?
I'm Brad Yoshimitsu. I'm with Prishna RNO.
And Councilwoman Torres.
Hi, Councilwoman Jamie Torres. I represent West Denver District 3.
Stella Zuniga, Westwood Community Action Team and Westwood Community.
Archer Squire.
Archer Squire, architectural designer at Radix Design in the Baker neighborhood.
Lupe.
Lupe Cantu, principal at Davis Partnership and resident of Virginia Village.
John.
Oh, John Hindelman, can you hear us? I see you've unmuted, but we can't hear you. Anyone else we haven't gotten to?
I'm not as familiar with the committee as you might be.
Okay.
So any other committee members that I have missed?
Okay, awesome. If we've missed you, just please throw a message in the chat to me and Joe Green, who will be kind of helping me manage the folks online. All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate your time, and are really looking forward to getting your input on what we've discovered. I think a lot of we're really excited with what we found, but we want to kind of share this first with you, and are really looking forward to input about some of the nuance that is sometimes a little bit more hidden. We're also looking for other things that we should be testing. This is not done, so we're still kind of at a point where if you have good suggestions, we can definitely take that and roll that into what we're doing. So I'll start off with this quick recap before we move into the looking at the strategies. So we've moved past the introductions and a reminder of our project goals. So this project has kind of three main themes that we can accomplish. We can improve the compatibility of the what is being built within our low intensity residential neighborhoods. While doing this, we can also improve the attainability of the housing that's been built. We've looked at how much new homes that are built cost in the neighborhoods that would be affected by this project. So we're looking to bring that down to earth and hopefully result in a more attainable product on what actually gets built in our residential neighborhoods. And the third piece is improving supply. So by allowing these additional types of housing, we can enable more housing units within neighborhoods that are often, could be considered built out, since the zoning districts, these single unit and 2 unit zone districts really allow for no more than what exists there currently. So within these three themes kind of working together is really where I have a really unique advantage of this missing middle housing type to kind of advance all 3 of these goals at the same time. And they have this really cool effect of how they work on each other, and kind of each one kind of leverages the strengths of each other goal. So we are trying to accomplish those goals in this 2-phase project. And again, this first phase is not the whole project. We will have, the second phase of the project that follows. But within this first phase, we've, to remind you all, we've kind of pared down and the strategies that we're focusing on due to changes in the city's budget and less staff time to work on this project. And focused on the pieces that are first of all more simple and have the clearest plan guidance to get these accomplished first, rather than setting out a further finish date for the entire project and not getting anything completed in the interim. So within this first phase that is looking at bringing something to City Council for consideration and adoption at the end of 2026, there are 3 key pieces. The first are updates to our building forms and scales, or building form and scale, the size of buildings, the mass of new structures that's so much larger than what exists currently in the neighborhoods that would be affected by this project. The second is the what we're calling the infill bonus. So this is where additional missing middle housing or additional housing can be built on a property when the existing primary structure is retained. And the third strategy is what we're calling the affordability bonus. So this is where we're allowing a complete redevelopment of a property with missing middle housing when one or more of the units is a deed restricted affordable unit to a particular income level in the city. So we met last in November of 2025 and discussed these 3 strategies that I just reviewed, the updates to design standards. We talked about the floor area limitation and the sliding scale that would allow more floor area for additional units. And then we talked about both of the opportunities for missing middle housing, being the infill bonus and affordability bonus, and what those standards and specifics are. So we're still working on that, and we look forward to bringing that discussion back to you. We heard some great input, and again, this is what we're working on still to kind of integrate that into our strategies as we continue to develop them. First is that we heard support for these approaches, that we're heading in the right direction, but we need to be cautious about some of the specifics and potential unintended consequences, potential of making things too complex. And kind of need to get out of the way in some areas, while also not exacerbating problems with gentrification and displacement, and the need to balance compatibility of housing with what exists, balancing that with the need to add new housing. And then also a lot of discussion about non-zoning barriers, so building code barriers and other concepts that move along with this, but are not specifically in the zoning field. Joel, I saw your hand up. Do you have a clarifying question?
One of the things I have a concern about is we've talked about a lot of potential changes in these meetings, and not all of them were captured here. And there doesn't seem to be like a master list of the things we thought about and which ones are moving forward or not. For instance, we did talk about re-examining lot sizes. in some parts of the city, the
Yes.
minimum lot size is.
Absolutely, and that is something, I will say that this is absolutely right, you're right, this is not a comprehensive list. I'll make sure that our website is up to date with our notes that we've reported back from each of those meetings. That would be where the more comprehensive list is of the concepts that we've looked at, but that's a great point, we can prepare something that is.
So this is not testing a final selected recommended set of interventions. This is a few interventions and let's see how they work independently, and it might be joined with other changes.
That's correct. So due to the timeline that we have in this project and the need to kind of move forward with multiple parts of the project at the same time, we kind of took some of the most impactful building form changes that that we've been talking about and are working with those to try to inform the models that were built and kind of how that would impact the feasibility on what actually can be constructed. So you're right, this is not a testing of the final form with our timeline. That would kind of be impossible to fit all that in there. So you're right. So that the feasibility might change slightly throughout the project. I can let our consultants talk a little bit about that too. But at this point, yeah, this is not a testing of the full set of recommendations. In addition to our last advisory committee meeting, we also met with City Council and Planning Board at a work session in December. We discussed similar things, these kind of key 3 proposals, and again, heard similar feedback that we're heading in the right direction, but we need to really explore feasibility for homeowners rather than just builders. What's possible in a home that actually that exists, and expanding the number of dwelling units without expanding any floor area or building anything new. Looking at more options for market rate development, so without some of the caveats that we have right now with the 2 ways that you can build missing middle housing. And then of course to continue exploring potential impacts to displacement and working with other strategies that are part of this project to limit those impacts or eliminate those impacts altogether. And then also to continue to address non-zoning type barriers. So today we are going to look at again kind of this interim financial feasibility analysis and some of these outcomes based on some of the recommendations that we've talked about with you all for the building form changes. Specifically in the urban neighborhood context. We're also working on the urban edge and suburban context. Those will of course be slightly different so that we can address the differences in kind of the built form of those areas, the lot sizes, the existence of alleys and circulation of streets. All these things mean that we'll need a different solution for those areas. This focuses on urban. We'll have a meeting, the next meeting in April that we have, we'll talk more about urban edge and suburban. We will also have more conversations about building form details and that refinement. We will also talk more at length about zoning lot sizes and potential minimum density requirements. This is something where, we have some zone districts across the city, whether it's along our corridors or in residential neighborhoods in places like the row house zone district and multi-unit zone districts. And should we look at disallowing single unit use or having a minimum number of units for land area or something else that might push more development in those areas where it's already allowed. So we'll talk about those approaches at future meetings. Today, we want to stay focused on this financial feasibility recommendation for the urban context.
Hey, Rob.
Yes, Madam Chair.
I have a question. So the scope of this is kind of enormous, right? And we have this goal of trying to get some kind of, I'm assuming, a text amendment by the end of the year.
Correct.
And so are the working sessions organized to get as much into that amendment as possible? Or is it we're gonna be super focused and get just a amendment for urban context zone districts? You know what I'm saying? Because the context is radically different between the two, right? And so when we look at like scale and form, that's gonna look really different, right? So just trying to wrap my arms around like, or my brain around, what is the full like scope
We're
goal
confident
for
we
end of the
can,
year?
by the end of this year, have a proposal that includes all of the neighborhood contexts.
Wow, okay.
But the places we've limited in order to do that is why we're focusing on, you know, this type of housing is only allowed in these more limited circumstances. And so it's a little bit of both, to answer your question. Like, we are having to trim off some things and set aside stuff for the second phase. You know, like, for example, at one point we had talked about potentially, you know, getting rid of minimum lot size and not having the USU A, B, C, and D and combining those and doing, that's just too much to talk about and too much to figure out. So we're, instead of doing that and you know, we're putting that aside for phase 2. So that's maybe just an example of like ways that we're trimming down the scope in order to kind of have something that does affect the, you know, all three contexts.
Do we know which context would make the biggest difference?
Probably urban, because that's urban and urban edge, just because that's where we see most of the development now. In other cities that have done similar projects, where development happens after the project are the same places that we see development before the project, and those are the areas that we see development now. So those are the areas that we suspect or expect the new development to occur that would take advantage of these changes. But that's, you know, that right now we're just going to focus on urban and for today's meeting, but we are confident we can bring something forward that does include the full original scope of the context, urban edge and suburban. But great question. All right, so now let's get into it. So we're going to talk about some of the what we're doing when we talk about testing these strategies. So for the first phase 1 strategies, and as I've kind of described, we have been working on this economic feasibility analysis. So so what is that? So the analysis will really help us it informs the project strategies, but is also informed by the project strategies. So that's why this is kind of this interim stage where we are analyzing, you know, the inputs for construction cost and land values and really what it costs to build things. We've done this, or our consultants have done this primarily through developer interviews, case studies, and I'll let them talk more about that as well. We'll look at a variety, and they have looked at more variety of development scenarios using the current rules and the proposed rules to understand what might be changed by those rules, and to understand what is actually feasible, what pencils, what will work, what's likely to actually be built once our zoning changes are implemented. So this helps to forecast that potential return on investment for developers, again, to understand what might be possible, and also understanding whether individual property owners, conventional developers, affordable housing developers, you know, whether this works for these different groups. And with that, I will pass it off to either Arlene or Cheney. Is there anything else you'd like to say on this slide, or should I move on?
No, just go on.
All right.
So as Rob mentioned, we have talked to a number of developers, both market rate as well as affordable developers, in order to provide the baseline scenarios for this work. We also did case studies, and we really did focus on West Denver because that's where a lot of the change is taking place. So there's a lot of neighborhoods that have the U context, but we focused there just because there's just a lot that's happening there overall. So in terms of the economic feasibility analysis, and the question is, what is this? So It essentially, you take all your costs for a development. So you've got your land costs that includes the cost of the house that's on top of it. And we're really talking about a developer that comes in that wants to potentially scrape or add on, and then will sell or rent out that unit pretty quickly after they finish the work that they're going to do. We've got development costs as well, and that includes the hard construction costs, soft costs like architecture and engineering. We've got entitlement costs like permits and fees, and then also financing costs. You know, you're borrowing money in order to build whatever it is that you want to build. And then on the other side of things you've got revenues. So it's what you're going to sell that unit or units for. It's what you're going to rent it for. We also took into consideration broker fees. So we did try to model what sort of the real world scenario is. And we did really look at a lot of sort of case studies of properties that have actually transacted. And we did focus in the last 4 years. And then what we're looking at is.
Did you include taxes as well?
Yeah.
Taxes as well as broker's fees?
Taxes on.
Sale or purchase of home, of a property?
Yeah, we can get into that, yeah.
And we'll stop for questions at the end, so if you can just hold your questions, and then that way we can move through what we're trying to get through.
So ultimately, when we're talking about the returns, we ran it through 3 different metrics. And so we have the return on cost, and that's primarily for ownership for sale housing. And so in this particular scenario, we included our developer fee. And so that includes, it's like a 10% developer fee on cost for both market rate as well as affordable developers. We also included a 5% profit for the market rate developers. And basically that calculation is whatever your project return is divided by your costs. And so our threshold, the amount that we're aiming for is 15%. Then we ran it for a return on investment. It's whatever our return is divided by whatever our initial investment was. And in this case, we assumed it was that initial cost of the land and the housing. And so that threshold is 20 to 25%. And then we ran it also assuming that it was a rental yield on cost, which essentially that is your net operating income after the unit is rented out. That's basically your income minus your expenses divided by your total costs. And we're looking for a 7 to 9% return overall. And so scattered throughout this presentation, you'll see the little check marks, and they're either in green, yellow, or red. Green means that the project or the change is likely feasible. And it meets the threshold. So that's like, go ahead. Yellow is it's got positive returns, but it doesn't meet the thresholds. So it's a maybe. So if you're at the higher end in terms of the numbers that you come up with, you may move ahead. If you're at the lower end, not likely. And then likely infeasible is in red, and that's it's just negative, the returns. It just doesn't make sense. So I'll turn it over to Cheney.
All right, so the way we're gonna do this is Arlene and I will kind of tag team the next few slides, and I will present kind of the assumptions in terms of what the zoning changes might be, and then how that manifests on the ground and what that looks like. And then Arlene will talk about the feasibility of each of those, and we'll go through each strategy. So the first strategy, as Rob mentioned in the early part of the presentation, is number 1, addressing the scale and the mass and scale of existing buildings. So the single unit homes and the 2-unit homes that you see today that are large, and I've worked on a lot of neighborhood plans, and we hear, they're out of character with what exists. So the first strategy is how to kind of ratchet down the scale of those forms. The number 1 way we're looking at doing that is with a gross floor area. So right now, the Denver zoning code does not have anything relative to floor area. You can build whatever fits in the zoning box. We would be looking at implementing a sliding scale. So the sliding scale depends on the size of your lot. If you're on a smaller lot, you can build, a little bit smaller things. If you're on a bigger lot, you get more floor area, as well as looking at the integration of the number of units. So if you have just 1 unit, it's the smallest. If you have more units, you get more area. And that's what a lot of the cities, case studies that we've looked at have done. Yeah, as we've talked about, just disclaimer that all of these are tested on a urban SU and TU lot. So a typical lot size of 50 foot wide by 125. So that equals 6,250 square feet. So if you hear us throw out numbers like 6,250, that's what it means. Yeah, next slide. So this and our initial strategy, this is a table that we put in red text. This is changing. This is probably the 47th table we've made. But this is our current thinking in terms of, just to give you an idea, that the different increments of lot sizes, and then the 1 unit. So on a we're doing 6,250, so that middle column, 5,000 to 7,000 square feet. If you're doing 1 unit, this is all above grade square footage, by the way, so you could build a basement and get more. It would be starting at 3,500 for a single unit, 4,000, and then for each additional unit, you get 500 square feet more. The graphic on the right is from Sacramento, just showing that the scale will go up the more units you provide. Yeah, you're on. Okay. And then the other way to manage bulk is really in the height and the bulk plane. And so another big change is primarily with the third floors that we're seeing. It's really stated as a half story in the Denver zoning code, but what it manifests in the on the ground is a smaller third story. So you get those, some people call them the dog houses upstairs, with the outdoor patios on the roof, which we live in Colorado. We all want to see mountains, but that is very out of character with the majority of our neighborhoods that have the more pitched roof. So the new rule would be, if you want to do a third floor, you can, but we're changing the definition of a half story, that half story, that third floor would have to be under a roof. So under a roof structure, a pitched roof. And flat roof structures would be 2 stories max. Next slide. This is a diagram from the regulatory diagnostic, just showing how the outcome of the current standards, that, you know, with the bulk plane and the setbacks and the height, you know, that's the common formula that you get. And with the outcome for the recommended standards, that third floor would have to be tucked into the roof form. Next slide. So let's go into the testing that we did. So this is looking at the existing rules for an urban house. So if you wanted to build an urban house form, which you can currently do in SU, TU, RH, you know, pretty much a lot of places in Denver. So what that can equate to, not all new houses are this big, but I'm maximizing the area of the buildable envelope. And what you get is about a 4,700 square feet. All of this is above grade. So you can have more under, and then you can also do an ADU in the back. So that's what we modeled here. And then with the proposed rules in yellow, this is kind of how things would change. And so how that manifests in a new condition with the proposed zoning changes would be a 3,300 square foot home. And if you still wanted to do an ADU, then you get the, we're showing 850, although these, like I said, these numbers are changing. So 4,150 square feet is what we're modeling. The table, if you did your homework and you want to ask the question, is our current thinking is now for 2 units would be 4,000 square feet total. So it's a little bit smaller than this, but just compare that to, you know, the maximum that the zoning spits out today is about 5,550, you know, maybe a little bit more, and we would be going down to 4,000 for 2 units. An ADU would be considered a unit. Next slide. And then in the duplex, so for the TU districts, so you can do a duplex in the TU, RH, some SU districts do allow 2 units on corners, and there's very small areas. So primarily TU and RH districts. is where we're seeing the duplexes go up. So same thing, the form basically stays the same. You get 5,550 square feet total for those 2 units. And then again, what we modeled was 4,300 square feet. What the table shows is 4,000. So around 4,000 square feet is what we're looking at for 2 units. So you could get 2,000 square foot instead of 2,750 is what is about the average we were seeing on the high end of those duplexes. And a lot of them do have basements that would not be counted. So then going into looking at the feasibility of each of these, Arlene, I'll let you.
Sure. I did also want to mention that the house and the duplex assume a garage in the back. So that's not counted towards that overall square footage, but it's included because if you're in a house form or in a duplex, we're assuming that folks want a garage. As we move further into denser options, we've actually surface parked it. So we are thinking about some of these things. They're part of the costs, but they don't show up in the square footage. So just something to keep in mind. So the urban house that was modeled at 4,700 square feet above grade was shrunk down to 3,300 square feet. You see the difference in price overall. It does shrink. It's not exactly affordable, but it's a little less expensive. The feasibility is, it's positive, but it doesn't meet those threshold returns. And the same with the duplex. It's shrunk overall. Each side is then about $1 million per unit overall, but it doesn't meet those feasibility thresholds. Now, if you added an ADU in the back on top of the garage, they actually do meet your feasibility thresholds. And those would need to be rentals. So you incorporate that income, that would meet the threshold for a developer that's looking to develop but with a new sort of smaller form. So the overall, the next slide. It does reduce, limiting the gross floor area, reduce the potential returns. It's still positive, but not as desirable potentially. And again, we would be hitting maybe a few more households, but it's not exactly affordable. Next. Oh, questions.
All right, so looking for questions about clarity. So I've got Joel, Lucia, anyone else? Corey, Nola. We'll start there, and then Angela. All right, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand the output, the final kind of thing. So tell me if I'm wrong here. If this change was made to have the variable sized envelope, the scenario we see commonly today of replacing a house with a house might be somewhat retarded, might be somewhat reduced because it's less profitable. However, the same can be said for duplex. So where today duplexes are allowed, and in the future with UHC, where duplexes will be allowed, creating those duplexes will be less feasible than creating duplexes today. So the first one, if this is a valid interpretation, the first one seems fine, right? That's my reaction. Fine, less incentive, just replace a house with a house. You haven't made any more housing for anyone. But making duplexes less feasible causes me pause, especially if one of the goals of this is to allow things like duplexes in more areas of the city. Yet we're making them less feasible. Tell me if I'm interpreting this correctly.
But could you develop a duplex now where you couldn't previously develop a duplex?
Yeah, so there'll be this dimension to this effort that's allowing it in more places, but simultaneously making it less feasible for duplex. And I know that's not the only scenario. Duplex isn't the only scenario, but work with me here. Am I getting this?
Yes, yeah, you're tracking.
Which is like the market will say it's not feasible, because
Right,
that's why we have what we have.
So we may allow duplexes in more places and not get them.
That's right.
Right. So that doesn't sound great.
Right. That makes sense.
Let's see, who is next?
I don't even remember.
Lucia, go ahead.
So, again, we're not adding any housing units. That thing to make it like this instead of having the outdoor patios, which I think is a massive amenity and makes it very attractive, you're getting rid of it because of character?
You would still be able to do a patio on the second floor. It's really just the.
But that doesn't answer my question. Are we doing that decision because of alleged character of neighborhoods? Is that why that's being proposed?
In part, yes.
Okay, because,
when we talk about character, we're really talking about the size, not so much the fact that it is an outdoor patio.
So, I mean, in places where I've seen this, in Wash Park, anyways, you know, you got one of these and it's next to a bungalow, and again, that is the character of the neighborhood, because, and I'm very envious of these people who have these wonderful rooftop patios on that level. It's wonderful. And my objection to making everything pointy roof is that it's like you're turning the city into Highlands Ranch. You want
I appreciate your comment,
everything
Lucia.
to
I'm gonna
okay.
stop you just because this is getting more into the discussion that we're looking
All
forward
right.
to having later and.
So the answer though, it is about character and not about adding units.
It's about the size of the structures that we see getting built with that full third story. You can still have a flat roof and still have a patio on the, you know, on
But you
your
can't
roof.
have a patio on the third floor, on the roof of the third.
That's correct. So, all right,
would buy it.
who was, thank you, I appreciate that. Corey, go ahead.
I just have a technical one. I think you had it on a slide before. Are you dealing with the rear 35%?
Yes, we are. I can't remember exactly what was included in this model.
Yes, we are currently modeling with that. That's up for discussion, whether we keep the 65-35. But we've modeled it with maxing out the 65.
Max, so the rear 35 still has a lower height
Yeah.
and bulk height.
The existing rules do pay attention to a bulk plane. The proposed rules are eliminating the bulk plane, but we still are thinking about the 65-35. A lower height in the
Can I
back.
tack onto that question real quick? Are you also following current zoning for lot coverage?
Yes.
Nola is next.
I have a question for you two as far as experts. So if this, I'm trying to think of unintended consequences. And if this over the long term would make like a higher demand for mansions, like for very, very large homes, because there would be less of them potentially over time, right? Would a high demand at one part of the market affect other parts of the market? Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, the unintended consequences, that's a good question. I think Joel touched on it partially. I think there's another part of it where the dollar per square foot number just starts going up. And actually, you're seeing that in Wash Park already, where people are really just pushing what they can get for the above ground space. And that's maybe one of the consequences, sort of longer term. Shorter term, I think Portland has seen a reduction in just overall sizes as well as price points, because it tracks, you know, the way that we do prices here in Denver, it's dollar per square foot. So at least in the short term, it does seem to have made a difference. Longer term, it'll be interesting to see how it sort of pans out, because different neighborhood contexts, I think, will respond differently.
Right.
So, and it's sort of hard to know because, you know, we really did focus on West Denver, but you do see there's a lot of urban in like Washington Park, and the prices there are, you've got a smaller house size, but you still got really high prices. So people are really pushing that dollar per square foot. Yeah, because they can.
All right, who was next? Andrea, I might rely on you.
Next up is Angela, followed by Alejandra.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the presentation. As you were talking, right before you said it, I was thinking garage and ADU, and you said it will meet the feasibility threshold. What was the size of the garage? If you're talking about the amount of space you need, are we talking 1 car, 2 car? Is it, I mean, what was the idea behind the ADU and the garage? Because when we look at just as realtors, we look at what we're trying to sell and what's being developed. So is it based on a 1-car or a 2-car garage?
2-car.
Okay. Because that was my clarifying question.
Right, that's basically what we're seeing. In some cases, we actually do see 3-car, but we decided to cap it at 2.
So you did cap it at 2?
Yeah.
Okay, that was my question too. Is it capped?
Is
Thanks.
that garage part of the floor area ratio, or does it doesn't count towards the
It
floor area?
doesn't
Livable
count.
area, good,
It's
good
just a
question.
livable area.
Non-livable.
All right, any other questions about clarity and?
Alejandro had a question.
Sorry, go
Thank
ahead.
you. I wonder if this analysis includes how many more homes for people and by when they will be built, like you expect these homes to be built and be available to people?
I mean, just based on what we've seen in other cities, turnover rates are like between 1.5% and 2% of the impacted single-family homes turning over in about a year or in a year. So it's pretty slow. And again, we don't know what it will be in Denver. Those projects are also different periods in time, and that relates very much to like how the market is. So it's hard to say, you know, how quickly this would come online.
Okay. And the prices that you're showing for duplexes, so which we know will probably are more expensive than a quadruplex, right? It's not affordable, right? And I know that a lot of people in the community say, I do want more homes, but only if they are affordable, right? And so how are we gonna get community, you know, buy-in when the numbers are obviously showing us that these maybe new homes are not affordable?
Right, so this is the kind of longer term affordable. We're helping to add supply. That near term affordability will be accomplished in the other strategy that we'll talk about shortly in later in this presentation when we talk about when affordable units are required.
Do you expect this strategy to lower the average home price in Denver over the long term?
Over the long term, yes.
How long is this term that we're talking about?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I can answer that.
No, it's hard to say.
I see Councilwoman Torres has her hand up.
Just a clarification on this slide that's up right now, the grade duplex, 1.35 million per unit, so per side, each side is priced or results in that cost? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah.
So it's not what we see on the ground. So I'm just wondering what the example is drawing from. West Colfax, I have a maxed out duplex at 800,000. And in Villa Park, I have one at about 700,000. That's typically the price range that we see for the really kind of full envelope duplexes for each unit.
This is probably cold.
Yeah, that's a good question. It probably depends on the factor of the land cost.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. So, sure. And then I guess in terms of thinking about whether or not it's affordable or, you know, what the price would be, you just have to ratchet it down sort of mathematically or think about it in terms of percentages. I think, no, this example is actually probably from Sloan's Lake. So, just taking that into context and then just adjusting it for the different neighborhoods.
Okay, yeah, in West Denver, we're gonna find a very different price point than Northwest Denver, but I appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of West Denver too is zoned urban edge, which I think will help capture more accurately those land values and those situations. But great comment, great question.
I think Gosha had her hand.
I have two, one quick technical. So for the urban house, the ADU, are you not considering the bulk plane on the rear side of the lot anymore?
Correct.
Because the gable walls were.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. The second one is probably more complex, and maybe you're gonna talk about it, but like the outcome that I see is like it's not really creating affordability and it's not really meeting the feasibility goal. So it's like doing neither. So we may see that like there's just less supply overall because of feasibility, and the units that we are getting are still not affordable. So just want to make sure that I'm seeing it correctly.
Yeah, it depends on the neighborhood context too. So a lot of these were run in Smones Lake, but in Wash Park, you can get these sizes and it will work. And what they're doing is they're maxing out the basement, they're maxing out the dollar per square foot. So some of this neighborhood stuff, the neighborhood differences really do matter.
And every lot in the city is not going to be a candidate for these either, right? When we're looking at what works on paper, and it's going to be the marketability of these different lots too, and the layout and where the house exists on the lot compared to where it's available. Yeah, and a number of, I guess that's not so much for this one, but for the other examples. Okay, any other technical questions? Awesome. Great, thank you. And we will have plenty of time to, or we hope to have plenty of time to kind of have a deeper discussion about the, and comments about what we're accomplishing after these next two strategies. So I'll hand it back over.
Okay, so next strategy is what we call the infill bonus. And so the difference in the current thinking for our strategies and other case studies is that in order to get additional units on a lot, so in single unit today, you can do a house and a duplex. In TU, you can do a duplex, So in order to trigger more units on a lot, it would be an incentive-based structure. So the number one incentive here that we're showing is this infill bonus. If you are saving the primary structure, retaining that primary structure, then you can get more units than is currently allowed. Again, we're using the same size lot, same, these testing assumptions are all the same. We're including space for 2 cars on the lot in these. This is an important observation that we wanted to point out is this could also mean you can subdivide a house. So if you have like a big Denver Square, you could turn that into a duplex, for example, and have 2 primary units within that. And so here are just a few examples. So the tandem house, this is a form that's currently allowed by Denver zoning code, specifically in TU, again, some SUs. But we think, this is an opportunity to infill the backyard. If you are aging in place, maybe you don't want to build an ADU, but a bigger structure. Maybe you want to subdivide the back of your lot and sell that off. These are examples for those types of infill, and so therefore you could get more units. So you could put 2 units in the back tandem house, 2 units in the saved house, or save the house, do 2 units, save the house, do 1 unit, however you want to mix it up. But just in making sure that the structure is saved in the front and you infill the back. So we're showing 2 options here, a tandem house that would be 2,300 square feet. And then we also modeled it at, I think, 1,700 square feet for a smaller size. And then also looking at cottages, these are modeled at about 800 square feet per unit. So basically like 2 ADUs in the back. And then on to the feasibility.
Okay, so I think the key with this one basically is that the land cost is basically 0. And so because this is an existing house, we assume that land cost went with the existing house. So the rest of it has no land cost associated with it. That makes the biggest difference overall. This is most feasible with alley access, so the parking is actually in the back. It's surface parked in the back. The first example, which is allowable, is 2,300 square feet for the tandem house. It meets the feasibility goals. The price would be about $800,000. The challenge with that is that, if you're at that price point, you have a variety of different choices within the market. Would you choose to live in a situation like this one? The other thing to remember also is that somebody likely would have scraped the garage and put the tandem house in place. And so what does that do to the, people like their garages, they like their cars. So that's part of the consideration in thinking about just the tandem house feasibility. We shrunk it down to 1,700 square feet in the second example. It brings it down to a lower price point at about 585,000. That's about 120 to 130% of AMI for those folks who are affordable developers in the room. And actually, this model is sort of for the affordable developers in the room. For those that already own property with land and an existing house on it, this is a way to add additional units and still reach some attainability. And then when you sort of split that in two and add sort of 2 backyard cottages, you bring the sort of sales price down even lower, and that's at about 85% of AMI. So again, it is feasible. There are some trade-offs that you need to think about. Is it going to work everywhere? Maybe not, but it's an option. And so adding the infill, we're calling it the infill bonus housing on a property can double the total residential floor area on a property. You can, because you don't have that land cost associated with that, it makes it a lot more feasible. And it does present potentials for positive returns on investment. It's an attractive option for homeowners, nonprofit land trusts, and then for market rate developers if they so choose.
All right, so any clarifying questions? Okay, we've got this corner lighting up. We'll start with Carson, Joel, and then Lucia.
So in principle, I think this is a good recommendation. I think my challenge with it is how much scale this can really deliver, like how many current owners would really exercise this option. And I'm sure some would, and certainly like affordable developers who can get land really discounted or have like a land trust model, like it makes a lot of sense there and I think is really beneficial. But I'm just kind of wondering like how many non-affordable owners would realistically like utilize the additional unit development potential in this option? And maybe you can look to like ADU ordinances in different places to see like what the uptake has been with current owners in those places. But that's really my flag here. And I get that this is like not the only recommendation and there are other recommendations that could help achieve scale, but just want to get your sense of like how many people would realistically utilize this to build more like backyard cottages, for instance.
I mean, that's a good question. It's sort of the trade-off that I mentioned. Would folks take advantage of it? I think certainly the affordable developers, in fact, they've done this already in certain neighborhoods, so they would take advantage of it. One of the considerations is probably the garage. It may work better in a different context. So with the garage facing the street, so that you're not getting rid of that. So that's another thing to think about, is that this may not work, correct me if I'm wrong, as well in the urban context, but could work in maybe in a different context. So, but just, and it's a form that's already allowed.
Great question. All right, Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing. I just want to pull apart the assumption. We're mixing two things here. We're talking about a development scenario in terms of the blue structure getting added, right? But we're also talking about this assumption that the land cost is zero. And we're not saying if the land cost was zero, if the land cost wasn't zero. I mean, that seems to be missing here. We'd love to see it because it would help answer the question, a lot of times if there's somebody bringing more money to do a development, to build those blue structures in the back, they have recently transacted the whole property. And so I don't know how to interpret this with this incredibly limiting assumption that the land cost is zero. It's nice to see it works well. That's really narrow. So can we do it the other way?
Oh, with assuming so we would then, so this is based on the assumption also that it's an existing landowner. So, I mean, honestly, the modeling is based on sort of the affordable developers and sort of an existing condition. So they do have property. This is something that they're already doing. In terms of someone that is, this is where it gets, so if you buy that existing house and you're gonna add another house in the back, then you have to figure out what you're gonna do with the existing property. And in order to make it feasible, you are more than likely going to have to add improvements or make some changes to it. And so when you start getting into the remodeling assumptions, it starts getting really like, what do you assume that someone does and what kind of return will they get? So that's one of the challenges with modeling this. I think that if you went through a scenario where somebody buys in order to add a unit in the back, I'm not sure it would have the same feasibility sort of returns.
It wouldn't have the same return because the land isn't free. Okay, we can assume that, right? That's obvious. But this analysis, even at a high level, seems entirely incomplete without doing those scenarios. Because there's so many more opportunities for someone to buy a house with land and build those little blue structures than there are opportunities for somebody that already owns it to choose to do it, to Brian's point, or to Carson's point, or it happened to be owned by DHA. I mean, those are important but very small cases. So this seems to be incomplete without that.
Okay, good point. We can run it, but the challenge we have then is, because you'll have to bring up, so it's what we do with the existing house and what sort of improvements we make. And that's,
I think
that's sort of a fundamental challenge that we have with this.
I think the thing you have to, is the house value going to increase because now you can build a unit in the back? That would kind of be the equivalent of that land cost, because if it didn't increase, I could buy that property, I could build that one in the back, and I could sell that property for what I bought it for, maybe a little bit more. And so there isn't really a land cost to it. But if doing this actually increases everyone's values because now there is a development opportunity in the back, there's some cost to that.
Right, you increase the entitlement, you
Right.
increase the value.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Period, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what we see with cities that are moving away from, single unit zoning, is like private equity, smart, right? You figure it out. I'm just curious about what you assumed is the square footage cost for construction for these houses, and also if you considered tap fees,
Yeah, these
all
are
of
in
that
there.
in the.
So we assume that each of the lots you have the ability to do 2 taps. So for duplexes, you don't need to buy an additional tap. Once you hit a 3rd unit, you need to buy a tap. You also need to go through site development review.
Pretty sure the ADUs have to have their own tap though, right?
Not ADUs, but tandems need their
The
own tap.
tandems need to have their own tap, okay.
So, so we did add taps. And then we ran all of these at anywhere from like 250 to 350 a square foot, and it just depends. This is hard costs
Yeah.
only, right?
Right.
And so,
That's about
and
right.
then
250,
for just the primary, and then garages and basements were also added where they were appropriate, and they were run at just a lower dollar per square foot.
I'm just going to read out the queue here real quick. So we have next Lucia, then Angela, then Alicia. You had your hand raised. I don't know if you already got your question answered. And then Lupe online will be next. So Lucia is up.
Don't yell at me, Rob, because I don't think that I'm not sure if this is technical. So you've given it a green check mark for feasibility. And if you run the numbers and you have these sort of make-believe scenarios, then they work. However, to Carson and Joel's point, I mean, how many of these, there are not really many of these available in the urban context. And you said maybe it would work better in a different context. But then why are we looking at this for the urban context? And how does it get a green check mark if there's hardly any lots available that you would be able to do this in, is my question. I mean, are we including the actual availability of these things in the feasibility study, or are we just looking at numbers?
I would push back a little bit and say that there are a
Probably
good number of lots in this configuration that have the house about where these are with that area
This
in
is
the back.
probably the most available
Yeah.
solution in Denver. I mean,
Well,
if you think about
in an
Denver
urban
consists of
In an urban
70%.
context, this is only the urban, not the urban edge, not the suburban.
Yeah.
This is we're just talking about urban today, right?
That's a 6,500 square foot lot, right? Like, yeah, so
Correct.
that's your typical urban.
I think the layout's very typical, the situation where there's no land cost, that's where I get caught up, right?
Well, I think he had provided a good explanation. I guess I was sort of struggling with when you remove a garage, does that sort of impede the value? I think you're sort of saying maybe nominally, but essentially you sort of have reduced the land value by a pretty considerable amount.
Lucia, my concern was not about land availability, it was like how many current homeowners would exercise this option.
Well, there's that. How many people would want to give up their backyards?
Right. Or maybe someone wants to buy a house with the intent of doing this, right? That would essentially be a zero land
I'm
cost
assuming
for
they
that
have the
property
stomach
owner.
for development, which is a gladiator death sport.
In this city.
Especially single
Right,
unit.
yeah, exactly. They know well, right? Do this every day, but
Rob,
I mean.
You just said what I was saying, if you bought the house with the intent of doing this. Well, that's what I'm trying to get, that's not zero land cost, right? Or is it some,
If
I'm
you
not a
can buy the
developer.
house and then sell the house for the same that you bought it, then you have a zero land cost.
I mean, there's
Split it
probably,
across the two. I mean, there's different ways of thinking about it, but essentially the way
Holding the cost.
I was thinking about it was
Yeah, you're paying interest on
I was
that.
thinking about it, we could run it in a different way. It,
You're hemorrhaging money until you can sell it.
the land cost is significantly reduced though, because essentially you're having the cost. Having it or
But a landowner could, so if I lived in the White House in the front, couldn't I with ownership lots, I could sell my backyard too? And so then I'm making a profit on my backyard and selling that to someone who, a land trust, or someone or a developer that wants to build the house, because I'm not a gladiator.
I mean, it's brutal.
but
And
I
I'm
think
just thinking of all the zoning challenges with this too, like.
I don't think we're making it any easier in this room.
I think to Jill's point though, and I just want to reiterate, this is an incomplete study, right? We are in the middle of this and sharing these interim results. So I think it's a great point to point out that we need to continue and we need to look more closely at some of these other situations, which we absolutely intend on.
This is a snapshot of the study, where the study
Exactly
is.
where we are right now. But this is exactly the input that we're looking for. So this is all great conversation. All right, who is next?
Next up is Angela, followed by Lupe.
Oh, so my question is, and we were talking about this configuration. So because we're in a study and we're doing this as an example, what you just said, how many of the urban lots, like you said, there's some available, Rob, but I'm thinking of areas, and you mentioned that they have to have alley access. If you look at most of the development now, there are no alleys. So for me, it's a limited number of lots that we're talking about that would be part of this feasibility study. I'm just thinking about the most recent and even within the last 30 years, because I'm in my house, there's no alleys in my neighborhood. So where are we, and I'm considered urban as well, even though I'm out there, I'm still in the city of Denver, city and county of Denver. So my question is, because you're limited to the alley access or some kind of street access, I can see, I mean, you're gonna be talking about all kind of infrastructure changes if you allow this and there isn't any other access. I mean, how do you work that into the study to say, on the rear side, you can put a cottage or a tandem house, but if you don't have alley access, it doesn't make sense.
So I think there may be some misunderstanding. So this is really looking at like the USU zoning. So like when we say context, it's like capital C, like urban single unit zone district. Yeah, so this would be to the more, central areas in the city. And it's less likely that this would be feasible in the newer neighborhoods or up in northeast Denver.
Yeah, and that's where it gets exclusive for me. How do you,
Right.
or not inclusive, I should say.
And that is where that's that's forthcoming.
Okay.
It'll be a different study. There'll be different factors we'll talk.
I think there are creative solutions though, where you don't have an alley, and we've mapped alleys, most U and edge, urban and edge, the U and the E, most of those contacts do have alleys. It's when you get into the S, the suburban, where you lose the alleys. But, you know, if there is room for a driveway, that could be the access to the backyard house, without.
Yeah, I'm just saying we gotta be creative.
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna do this on a citywide basis, whether you're using whatever code or classification, how do you become more inclusive of giving the option, I said?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, great point.
Lupe is next up.
Yeah, just to kind of double back on the utility question. I think these are all excellent options. I guess my larger question is, within the existing infrastructure where these urban units would exist, is there capacity to allow for the added fixtures?
From our conversations with the Dottie folks who are looking at that sewer capacity and is that kind of what you're speaking to?
Right, and only because if there's limited capacity, then obviously there's going to be a kind of a hold of how many actual units can be developed on one given block.
Yeah.
And that's the only, and if you're outside of that, then you become the unfortunate person that has to basically pay for the upgrade. And that can be fairly costly. So I was just really curious to see if that's also been studied in unison with this.
Yeah, great question. The way that they seem generally unconcerned about capacity with the number of units that would be added across the city. And generally the way that they forecast shows that they have plenty of capacity in most neighborhoods. And of course, there are certain circumstances that are different where they're kind of acute problems. But they said more of the issue is kind of like single large buildings with a whole lot of new capacity. That's kind of where they have more issues and again, seems fairly less concerned. Andrew, unless you think you took away something different from those meetings.
No, I agree. That's definitely how you characterized it correctly.
Well, and we'll continue those conversations, but at this point, they seemed generally unconcerned.
What about Excel?
Great, thank you.
Can I ask one more? The size of the unit, is that dictated by floor area ratio again? Or what is dictating the size of the unit?
Yeah, gross floor area. We are.
With both, or is it two separate?
Oh.
Is it one zone lot with 2 units on it, or is it 2 separate zone lots?
One zone lot with 2.
With 2 units,
And will it always remain one zone lot?
it will have to.
It would remain one zone lot.
Yes.
In the same way a duplex today is built on a single zone lot.
And then this is assuming though, based on that, I'm assuming that you've gotten rid of height restrictions in the rear 35 though,
There'll still be restrictions, but we've changed that, we've updated them.
like to go higher.
Similar to like what's allowed for an ADU, is that correct?
We've been using 24 feet in the back.
Can you split the parcel and create separate ownership?
Ownership
Yeah.
lots, yes.
Great.
Again, in the same
Parcel
way that the duplex can
reconfiguration.
today.
I have Alejandra next and then Kirsten.
Thank you. I appreciated that when you clarified that you can split the lot, because I feel like for most, middle income, lower income folks, that seems more feasible. I do have a question about this analysis study that we're doing. Are we gonna have also, beyond feasibility, how many more homes we're expected to see in what amount of time, and for what prices? I think that would be important for us to know if these strategies are gonna work at all or not, and I know it's just gonna be, kind of guessing. But I think that would be useful, at least for me.
Great comment. I don't think we have that today, but we'll definitely see what we can do as far as forecasting those numbers. Do we have anyone else on the list that want to try to get us moving?
Carson, and then we can move on.
Quick question, maybe dumb question. As part of this analysis on existing structures, were we gonna look at like feasibility of subdividing an existing single unit home? Because one of the things, and maybe it's not super applicable, maybe it's not relevant, but like these mega mansions on like 7th Ave or in South Park Hill that are in SU districts, like great candidates for being subdivided into multiple units. And in my opinion, maybe as co-ops, maybe as different things. That doesn't appear to be part of this, but are we gonna look at it at some point?
Yeah, it is part of it. I think I mentioned it on the slide before, but we didn't model it because it's inside the existing home, but totally. Yeah, this is like the future of.
Well, sorry, the subdividing and a parcel reconfiguration are different things in Denver. So you can,
Right, I think
You
he
can
was just
do-
using the term to say dividing a house.
right,
I don't think
right.
he's using it technically.
Right, but there, that words matter because a zone lot, a ZLAM is thousands and thousands of dollars. And a parcel reconfiguration application is not. It's $108. And then whatever your cost of your surveyor is, which is a couple grand, comparing to a ZLAM, which is a 4 to 6 month process with a bunch of consultants. So it is a huge cost differential from a process standpoint that gets rolled into that development cost. And so the parcel reconfiguration application is something I think that a private property owner could probably afford. But if we had to do like a full ZLAM, that would be cost prohibitive for most property owners.
Right, but that's not what Carson was talking
Yeah.
about. He was talking about dividing an existing structure, not the lot, but just adding more units within an
Right.
existing structure.
The
All right.
downside is that you're tied to that one lot with your neighbors.
You're absolutely right. All right, any other?
Mary Kate.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Alejandro, I appreciate the point that you made about what this is telling us and what it's not telling us. It's not telling us, to your point, how many houses are gonna be created, right? It's like telling us is it feasible that there could be take up, right? Like by some developer, by I guess what the 3 categories would be: homeowners, market rate, and affordable developers. And I'm having to think about that every time I see a new slide. It's really about is there a market incentive for take up for any of these ideas so far? I just kind of wanted to say that I appreciate your point because I'm having to keep on reminding myself that. And I do have that open question about how much housing it creates too.
That would actually be nice to have a sub from your kind of green, red, yellow and actually put those into those categories. Like
Yeah.
green, yellow, red for affordable for, right, and then for the individual property owner. And help us organize the information.
That's a great point because it would be different.
That's right.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna move us on to the next phase so we can get through these 2 more pieces before the end of the day.
Okay, so the final strategy.
I guess one more.
The final strategy is the affordability bonus, and so this is where you do get, the deed restricted affordable unit. Then it is fair game. If you promise to provide and you work with the city and do the deed restricted unit, then the lot is open for more units. And so we test some ideas here on that one when at least one affordable unit is provided. So a couple examples, the first one on the left is showing a cottage court. This is a prototype that exists in Denver a lot. In Northwest Denver, you see the kind of courtyard homes. It doesn't look exactly like this, but the same concept of this courtyard configuration. So you could do, for example, 3 cottages on a lot. That's what this one's testing. A really popular one that you hear a lot about is the house form, but multiple units within it. So could you still do that big house that you see today, but put 4 units in it or 5? So that's something that we looked at, and those numbers are there. Another one that is becoming more popular, case study cities that we looked at, was a double duplex. Again, these fee simple configurations where the units are attached rather than stacked. They're just more feasible, and Arlene can talk more about that. But this is an example where you could do a duplex in the front and then a duplex in the rear. So that is an opportunity. And then the last one we looked at was, if you took 2 lots together and really packed in as many units as you could get. So this is 2 62 lots together, so 100 feet. Then you really start to get that courtyard community, the cottage court. So we're getting 10 units on those 2 lots, so 5 per lot. And the more units you fit in, the smaller they get and the more affordable they get naturally. But you would have to dedicate at least 1 for a deed restriction. So looking at the feasibility,
So the double duplex works, it's basically 4 units overall. The 3 market rate units help offset offset some of the costs with the affordable unit. It's at, the affordable unit's at 360 to 690. I think that's about 80% of AMI. In any case, that situation does work. The double lot cottage, that's a lot of units on, basically these are 2 lots, so 6250, you can get up to 5 units on the lot. Overall, these are much smaller, and I think the range is, you know, anywhere from 280,000 if they're for sale. I mean, likely some of them would be rentals, up to 490,000. That's about 60 to 120% of AMI. So a lot of units that actually may work a little bit better in a situation where the lots are a bit wider. Next. And then the cottage court, which are 3 units, so 2 of them would be market, 1 would be affordable. That doesn't really work. There's just not enough market rate units there to help with the affordability of that 3rd unit. And then the multiplex, where it's basically 4 units within 1 structure. You do see that in historic buildings in Denver. Everybody loves this form, but you don't see very many being built, mostly just because for market rate folks, you've got a couple of obstacles associated with building that particular form. It's just a negative return. You have to build under the International Building Code and not the International Residential Code. So that adds a lot of costs on a per square foot basis. You have energy requirements associated with that. You have the condo construction defects challenge with this type of configuration. And then also you do have SDP site development plan requirements for the city of Denver, which kick in at 3 units. And there's a few other things that just make this a challenge. So you don't really see this form being built, even though everyone really likes it. It's likely infeasible for market rate developers. If the land cost is 0, it maybe can work for affordable developers. And it's because they can get around some of the condo construction defects through HOAs or other forms, but they still have to deal with the other challenges as well. So it's a form that everyone likes. It's just really, you don't see it being built. It's just really difficult to make feasible, at least currently. And, oh, okay. So fee simple configurations like double duplexes in particular, cottage developments are most feasible for the affordability bonus. The multiplex examples really don't work for market rate developers. And I mentioned the 3 or 4 issues that are associated with the multiplex sort of form. It might be feasible for affordable developers that already own the land, but there's still additional costs that they would have to deal with as well. So the 5-unit sort of example, I think just sort of proves or just shows you that those are naturally more affordable, mostly because of their smaller size. It might be challenging to fit that many units, but that's something I think that some folks are really thinking about.
All right, any questions on this one? All right, Joel, Lucia, and Nola, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, so the fact that in all these prototypes, all the buildings were in color implies that this is all new construction. There's nothing here that's being retained. So what I think I heard in the back and forth with Carson was subdividing existing structures is a part of not only UHC, but phase 1 of UHC. It's not being tested here, but we still intend to let people do what they've always done, take an existing structure, put more mailboxes on it, right? Okay. Then the second thing is I've long heard for new construction that what you're calling multiplex here might start being feasible at 6 rather than 4 units. And in addition, many of the constraints or many of the barriers you've talked about, which building code is there, SDP, those are entirely in the city's control. condo
Not-
defects, not as entirely in
Yeah.
the city, but a lot of them entirely in the city's control if they choose to help. So you tested 4, could you test 6? Does this sound reasonable? I mean, there are architects and developers in the room, but I think going back 5 years, I've heard them say, I don't know if 4 works, but 6 definitely works. And that stuck with me.
Yeah, mine is similar to the question. I mean, do we actually need an affordability bonus? If we were to build the fourplex, just build the fourplex and not have it be deed restricted, how do the numbers pencil then? Have you calculated that? Just wondering if we don't actually need that. And again, if you're building 6 rather than 4. But my other question is, this is for you, Rob, didn't we used to have like multiplex? Wasn't that, when we had the slot home code, we had 4, 2 in a slot home? Or some of the, I know that we have some of those in Baker.
Yeah, it was a little bit different than what we're looking at here. This is like a little bit more open, I think. It doesn't have the same limitations on entryway requirements and things like that, but.
But those were being built all over the city, so we knew that it was feasible.
Those are typically allowed in higher density zone districts like the row house and multi-unit districts. So you're thinking about like the townhouse or the row house building form.
Well, the one I have in my mind is, it's a fourplex. The front doors all face the street, but they're behind each other.
They're
So,
side by side, that's the difference.
They
These are
step back.
stacked.
They step back. Right?
But that wouldn't be allowable in a single unit right now,
Yeah.
but that's what they're saying. It could be.
but I thought we were getting rid of single unit.
Currently, it's not allowed
I know, but it used to be allowed.
in townhome district.
Baker's not a townhome district.
It's row house. Bakers use URH mostly.
Mostly.
So that, yeah.
Yeah, great comment though.
I had NOLA next in line.
So none of the feasibility has subsidies in it. This is doing it without any type of.
Correct, yeah, so with the smaller units, and I think that someone was kind of getting at that, with smaller units, you can actually get naturally occurring affordable housing without having to place a deed restriction on it just by the size.
But in this scenario, you would have to place at least one of the units a deed restriction.
Yeah.
In order to get this, but otherwise it would be use by right for up to, I mean, not thinking about the feasibility, but thinking about the entitlements for affordable developers.
As much as you can fit on the lot.
As much as you can fit on the lot, yeah. So we will run 6.
Alicia?
Yeah, just, once we get up to the higher units, it's like, what's the differential between, something like that and just moving it to a row house district? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, we can do row houses under the IRC.
Side by side units, not stacked.
Right, that's what I'm saying though. At like what point, you see what the delta, what's the delta difference? It's like if we're gonna get more affordability with turning that current zone district into one where I could do row homes and get more, which would give more housing options at a more affordable price point and do it under the International Residential Code instead of IBC, like, do you see what I'm saying? It's like, is that the rule that bends that the city can control? Or is it, changing the entitlement path to make it pencil? Or I'm just trying to figure out like what the incentive is for delivering this when you have to have one unit that's deed restricted. And then also, did you factor into your cost, like your model, the administrative costs it would for the city for host to administer and manage that deed restriction over the life of that property is another cost, I think, that's real to the city. And I didn't know if that was also factored in, but I just feel like at some of these higher level units, even though they're not stacked, it's like, am I making sense? So I'm trying to explain it, but it's like.
I think the answer is political choice.
it's political choice, right? But, and it's like, you know, for some of these configurations, it's like, would it not be better just to have a row house?
Yeah, well,
Right? It's easier for the developer. It's, right? You can get pretty small units, go up and still unlock more housing options within the price point. Or maybe, you know, I think comparatively.
It would
With just
result
some-
in a slot house essentially.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting back, yeah, exactly though.
One
Like-
response I could offer to that is our adopted plans have a lot of guidance that talks about allowing additional housing units, but preserving the kind of look and feel of more conventional residential neighborhoods. So that's why we're looking at this through the lens of what can we do within a structure or set of structures that are kind of at a house scale and have a similar appearance at the street. And so that's why we're not looking at, you know, we don't really have a plan support, adopted plans guidance that would support allowing row houses in a single unit zone district. So we're looking at how could we allow additional units, potentially in a fee simple scenario like the cottage developments, but in a form that is more at a more neighborhood, kind of single unit neighborhood scale.
I think that might just be a design issue though, that an architect could sort out, because if you look at like the new duplexes that Heritage Homes has actually in your district, they look like single family homes and they're living in those units, so. I just don't wanna like limit the creativity of architects. I mean, that's how we got slot homes, was because of architectural innovation and a blind spot in the code, right? And crafty, right?
Alejandro hasn't gone yet, so.
Me first. I wonder with these adopted plans, because I was reading Blueprint Denver last night. I was very tired, so I don't remember all the details. At what point the look and feel of a neighborhood, which could be a very expensive, exclusionary look and feel of a neighborhood, outweighs sort of the social equity aspect, you know, homelessness, access to housing, healthy housing, near your job and your school and all that. I mean, like, there's gotta be a way to, because this one is very subjective, right? But this one, we're feeling it. And so at what point do we say, okay, yeah, we want to, you know, for it to look a certain way, but also we need to house people at a rate that, you know, they can afford in a place that's healthy for them and for their kids.
Yeah, that's the
my
tricky
question.
part. Yeah, that's the difficult balance to strike, right?
I don't know that there's a balance there. I mean, that at the end ends up being a political choice and a value, you know? I mean, the Blueprint is all about, you know, this equity and access to housing for everybody.
Right.
Got Joel, then Corey, then Karen.
Yeah, so I was sort of on the same wavelength with Alicia here in for sort of all SU areas, right? These kind of forms being very compatible makes sense to me, but I do wonder in terms of the plan support for the missing middle effort in general, if there isn't already some language talking about proximity to our major corridors and transit. So there might be in the complete package here a feathering in of things like row houses. That's outside of the scope of what we're doing today. What I wanted to ask was, today is, I think, the first day I've heard you all say, every time you're talking about the at least one affordable unit, which I think we kind of landed on in previous meetings, you're always saying deed restricted. And in previous meetings, it was sort of open as to whether it would be deed restricted with that overhead from the city, et cetera, and testing the occupant versus testing the sale price or testing the rent price against AMI without having to qualify the occupant. Have you all somehow in between meetings decided deed restriction is the way to go?
No, that's just what we tested in these examples, was the deed restriction. We're definitely still looking at unit size, and Arlene mentioned it, you know, that at a certain point, especially I think when she was talking about this example on the right, with 10 units. You get to a point at a certain unit size that they become that naturally occurring. So it's definitely something we're still talking about, but how this was tested
If I could
is
just
why we're using that term.
throw out an example, a prototype that you didn't do, I don't know what you call it, but it's one structure, 2 units in front, 2 units in back, all attached. So they're all side by each, none are above each other, and you can find a newish construction, in the 2900 block of Champa. So I didn't, from the front, it reads like a row house because it's got 2 front-facing doors and it's got 2 kind of tucked back doors. But I think the condo defect stuff and whatever might be. Didn't know if that'd be a different prototype.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a good one to look at. So I think we've got some more questions coming, but at this point, I just kind of wanted to open it up and we've got this last slide really just summarizes kind of what we talked about through this meeting, right? That what we found and kind of how this guides some of our decision. But I'll just leave it on this slide and we can continue with the comments, but I just wanted to open it up and say if folks have, comments, suggestions, things they see as advantages or disadvantages, kind of moving beyond where we were trying to stay with more technical and we've kind of been bleeding outside of that. Right now, it's just wide open. I think we just want to hear your input, what we might be missing, what we might be able to test in the future, what are some advantages or disadvantages to these. But with that, I think I'll just go ahead and continue with the list that you have.
All right, on the list I have Corey next, and then Karen, and I'll keep track of whoever else wants to raise their hand next. Gotcha.
I just want to take us back to the very beginning because you talked about the gross floor area. So all of these examples are assuming that we're moving to that floor area model, right? And so in that model, do we have to choose a type? So in the code right now, there's urban house, there's duplex, there's this. Are we moving away from those form types? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, building forms.
Building forms. And it's just, there's the single unit zoning and we have this floor area. So you just can do whatever you want within that constraint. Is that correct?
That's a great
There would still be forms. This would just be
What would the forms be? Why would they be there? Why would
I
they
think
be
we're
needed?
leaning towards a house scaled form, and how many units go in that is up to the code and these rules, but that's what
As you said on that last one, if you do affordable, then you can max it out and do whatever. Does that mean I can do as many units as I want and they're 250 square foot units?
Well, we've talked about a minimum too. There are details that, we are still working through.
Because I think-
That's something that came up in our workshop.
I
Should
think
there
my
be?
point in it is we could get bogged down in all these examples and feasibility and the market changes in 6 months, in 3 years, in 5 years. I mean, it's going to constantly change. And so the looser that we can make the requirements, the more that the developers can adjust to those market changes.
But then the less predictability that people have. Because one of the things about building farms is like, what's in the menu if you're the public versus a developer. And that's a hard political sell, but I think that's a good point that like we should really look at what the limitations are by building form.
Well, with all these new types of building, like modular and 3D homes and all, is that gonna fit what we can do here?
And does that meet that, and is it actually realistic compared to what building code we have to follow, right? Because like we had that with like the tiny homes.
Yeah,
They had to meet energy code and that like blew that model out of the water as soon as we started, right? So it took like 3 years for us to develop type of
What
tiny
blew it
home
out of the
use.
water? I missed that.
Oh, energy code.
Oh, energy code.
Having to meet Denver building code on those prototypes first went out. So those are the kinds of unintended consequences that we need to start thinking about. But like the conflict between if we're gonna go to a GFA model versus a building typology model versus like now we're going back to kind of Euclidean zoning versus form-based code. doesn't add clarity.
Yeah, think about it as like build a form-based code, right? Denver has a hybrid code, right? We look at uses and forms. So a form-based code would really just look at the form and talk about what you can build, and within that form, you can do whatever you want, right? So we're still like kind of staying within the form base. We're establishing the forms. This is just a standard within that form, right? So some form-based codes use GFA and FAR. Some form-based codes like Denver's for a lot of other districts just uses, the other standards that kind of ultimately have the same effect and still like regulate the same types of things in just a different way. So this is a different tool, but we're still trying to have this form-based mentality where we're talking about what the building will look like. And in this case, we're thinking house scaled building. And then within that building, as long as you meet the requirements of that form, you could build 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units within that. We're gonna take a step back from regulating as much of like how many exact units. We are right now within this first phase. We have a couple of these caveats that we've talked about, right? Either the existing house has to stay or there needs to be an affordable unit. But this is just kind of a standard within our form-based code. Maybe that helps kind of clarify how we're thinking about it.
Can you remind me why we have these caveats? Why?
So these are the caveats that are the most straightforward examples of kind of how we comply with our plan guidance. So our plan guidance in most neighborhoods, they'll say, missing middle housing is appropriate when the existing structure is preserved, or missing middle housing is appropriate when affordable housing is developed. So within this first phase, to accomplish these goals while we still work out some of these more complex issues, one of the ideas that we're thinking about is something that Joel mentioned, right? Proximity to certain corridors and amenities and things like that. Those take a little bit more thinking and more time. And right now, we're kind of narrowing our scope a little bit so that we can accomplish certain parts of this project in the interim while we still kind of give ourselves more time to deal with those more complex issues. And they're more complex dealing with the code issues, and they're also more complex dealing with the plan guidance issues and the political issues. And we want to hear from more community members. If our project is going to have more potential to change neighborhoods, we want more time to develop that in coordination with those communities. That is one of the reasons why we're kind of focusing on this narrower approach for this first.
But the plan also says that middle housing is up to 9 units. Yeah. So we're choosing to sort of narrow the missing middle housing definition for this.
So I think one thing, I'll defend them for a minute. I mean, we all want more housing. We all definitely want more housing. But if we push that too far, you look at Littleton, you look at Lakewood, not that those pushed it too far, but you see the referendums that are happening. So I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to toe this very fine line. And the line seems to be getting more narrow and more narrow every time of how to do this in a way that the city, the residents of the city, feel like their voice is heard within it. And we are adding housing in a way that is responsible. We might still be able to add housing way beyond this in a way that's responsible, but it might not be viewed like that to other people. And so we have to figure out that middle ground of how to do that so that all the work that we do here doesn't just go out the door, at council or after that.
Yeah, but I'm worried that your definition of resident means a property owner who already has stable housing. But these are the people that usually have, more powerful voice, and I heard by.
If it goes to a vote, it's all the voters of Denver.
If I could, I want to come back to the original queue to be respectful of folks who've been waiting for a little bit. We had Karen in line, and then Lucia, and then Joel.
My question is actually starting to be discussed here. Are we trying to get current homeowners to think that this is a good thing for their neighborhoods, that they possibly will be able to profit from this and help with the housing? Is that what we're trying to do here? Or is this really more about development? Developers nonprofits and whatnot, is that, you know, are we trying to get Joe homeowner, Jane homeowner, to say, you know what, I've got an 8,000 square foot lot. It would be in my best interest to build another one. Is that what we're trying to do here?
Yes to both of them, right? We're trying to make it feasible for property owners and give property owners options who are different situations to have that flexibility to do with their property what they want or need to. And we're also trying to make this feasible so that home builders can produce the additional units that we need to house people in Denver.
And give renters hope that they can
They
actually
can
buy
buy.
something in the
Well,
city.
in the tandem to that one is, would the homeowner then be selling part of their lot?
Yes, in
To
some of
make
these
this work.
circumstances, yes.
They could. Or to give somebody a rent to own kind of. Okay.
All right, next up in the queue, I have Lucia, followed by Joel, then Mary Kate.
So the question that you were talking about regarding, you know, we don't want to have a backlash. We see what's going on in Lakewood, which by the way, we are fighting. YIMBY did a poll last year that showed that 58% of the pollies supported sixplexes on all lots in Denver. And I think that with that information, only 31% opposed and then 11% in the middle. But with that information, I think that's what we, if we know this, maybe that's what we should be looking at on a feasibility study. Is we know that we have a majority, 58%, in favor of that for all lots in Denver. So, having that information, I mean, you could look at the poll, we could, whatever you want to do, but I think even doing some polling might be worthwhile.
Let's see, next up, back to Joel, then Mary Kate, Carson, and Alicia.
Yeah, on the form standards, what staff said makes a lot of sense to me is that we have this framework we can plug more forms into. I'm hoping, and then we're talking about these in these low scale residential areas, right? Because once we get higher, we just say, envelope, 8-story, knock yourself out, general form. But in low scale residential, these forms, I don't think the new forms should be over specified. I think they should have the essentials, and I think one of the essentials for compatibility interior to neighborhoods is the block sensitive front setback. That's like the hill I want to die on, is that works really well in the zoning code. You can tweak bulk planes or whatever. The bulk planes make no sense in my neighborhood right now, so getting rid of them would be just fine. Because our lots are narrow when they're close together, but everywhere block sensitive front setback is a key thing. And after all, blueprint does call for the cottage court to be introduced. So none of our forms account for that. So we were gonna have to plug something in, just don't overspecify it. My main concern today goes back to the duplex discussion. It is the most commonly built, more than one unit, low scale residential thing. And I think the message I got today is by trying to depress the incentive for replacing a small house with a giant house, we're getting a knock-on depression of the propensity for people to build duplexes because we've reduced the feasibility of the duplex. So while this effort may make building duplexes possible in more areas, it simultaneously makes them individually less feasible. And I just don't think we're going to get the yield, and I don't know how to measure it because where that conversation went was with Councilwoman Torres. Well, in areas she's pointing out where land values might be lower, that might still be very feasible. And Arlene, you said in Wash Park where the sale price is, the square foot sale price is very high, they might still be feasible. So I don't know what to think. I'm just concerned about making duplexes less feasible.
Joel, could that be addressed by reducing minimum lot sizes?
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here you could do. I think this analysis was just change the envelope, change the yield, test the feasibility, because the construction cost was similar. But yeah, there are a lot of moving parts to this effort.
Next up, I have Mary Kate, followed by Carson, then Alicia.
Yeah, you might be getting here already before we close up, but I was hoping you all could talk about public engagement. I noticed there was a slide and it had dates and meetings that were gonna take place.
Yep.
We'd love to hear more about that, how you're gonna gather feedback, et cetera, across the city, so.
We'll go through the last couple of questions and we'll discuss that. Yeah. Carson.
Yes. You thought about modeling a bonus, a unit bonus, or like an FAR, like floor area bonus, or like a density bonus if you add another affordable unit? So maybe instead of, under the current proposal, you can build a fourplex on a lot with one affordable unit. Well, maybe if you add another one, you can get 6 units instead, right? Making the adjustments to enable that. Have you thought about that as a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually haven't talked about a cap on how many units would be possible, but yes, that's definitely in the playbook. And another thing that we've talked about is the gross floor area number. Maybe it's you get a bonus on top of that for each affordable unit. So it's yeah. So those are definitely things we've been thinking about. There's things that other cities have done with success. So absolutely.
At this scale, because I feel like density bonuses only work at a certain scale. But you said there's models of that happening at this scale?
Yeah, I think Portland did it. They have a 0.1 FAR bonus if one of the units is affordable, things like that.
That are utilized? Not that it's allowed, but that it's been studied as actually being used. Because we have a bunch of density bonuses in the city for, affordable, but they're not used very often because it doesn't pencil. So
yeah, I can check.
It would just be
Portland has
interesting
great
to
data
know.
on what they've done, so I can double check back.
I really appreciated the session a lot. I really like when there's this kind of analysis done. I think it starts to bring up and tease out some really good questions and decisions. So kudos to the full team. Really good work. I think one of the things that we're starting to see more attention with is just in general for this study is what things can actually be solved with zoning and what are actual policy pieces where we need our council to be courageous and proactively and not reactively thinking about things that will kind of mitigate unintended consequences or meaningfully incentivize what we want. Because zoning's kind of a blunt instrument, right? And so I'm just getting really curious about if those thoughts and discussions are being had, because that's also going to be really critical in how the public receives this and if it's going to be successful. So if there's other tools in place that address displacement or address making those incentives actually viable from the developer perspective or from an individual homeowner perspective. And so I just think that conversation needs to happen more. I know that's kind of outside of CPD, but I think it'd be great for CPD to be able to be like, hey, we love this, but this is not something we can solve with our toolbox. This is something that we need council to kind of workshop. So this is my 2 cents. Thanks.
All right. That's it on the queue. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Mary Kate. So we want to talk a little bit about next steps in the last 3 minutes we have here. So as far as public engagement goes, we have scheduled our first round. We haven't noticed these yet, so that's something that's forthcoming. But we have scheduled them at these locations for our public meetings. So these will be kind of open to the public. We'll give a kind of briefing, a summary of an overview of the project, and then solicit feedback from the general public in the community at these times. And we'll also have a virtual option. We're planning on doing another round of this later in the late summer, fall. In addition to these meetings, we're also going to send out a survey and distribute a survey to get input in that way too from the general public. So that will kind of round out our public engagement in addition to these meetings. Andrew, am I forgetting anything beyond those two?
I don't think so.
Okay, and then our next meeting, which the one that you all know about is April 16th. That's our next advisory committee meeting when we will kind of continue this discussion and build in what we've discovered in urban edge and suburban neighborhoods. And then I will send out invitations to you all for these I guess probably final two advisory committee meetings, unless there's another one that's kind of scheduled as at a later time. But right now, June 18th and August 20th. At that point, we really haven't figured out exactly what we'll talk about during those meetings, but I'm sure we'll kind of that will develop over time. But basically, we'll have this cadence of every other month through the rest of the project. And then shortly after this August meeting, we'll enter the adoption phase where we'll be meeting with planning board and then city council during those public hearings. So this really does bring us through to the end of the project. Around this August meeting is when there'll be that second round of community meetings. But
the end of this phase, not the end of the project.
Thank you. Yeah, the end of the first phase of this project, we will bring the package of the first phase of UHC to city council and then kind of reset before kicking off phase 2 in 2027. So with that, of course, you all have this slide deck and all of the appendix. Please reach out if you have any questions, things that you thought about after this meeting or things that you thought about during that you weren't able to share. We still want all your comments. Thank you so much for all your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Rob, were you able to talk to the gentleman from Lift to Rise, California?
Right.
Gabriel, I told you about how I talked to him. And he has specifically financial kinds of incentives, things that they're doing in California right now. Were you able to get in touch with him?
Should turn this left. See ya. Otherwise, it ain't gonna go well.
Yeah, we will do calls to action. Make sure they get out on our socials.
No, I don't think I did, but I'll also be
Because, I mean, what?
Yeah, where else?
Missing middle, therefore like a good relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, I made it myself.
Because they have some very similar situations to that.
I'm not used to, I don't actually know what that term means.
Do you want me to resend this?
I'm looking for it right now. Right, no reaction, like a rock went down and made no ripples. Oh, wow.
You got it? Yeah. We're getting to the point.
Yeah,
but
Like the area change in the
working to feasibility.
I see your point. That's like, it's not something we're not used to. Like, the rules are not set. Like, if they've been like, these are the rules, tell us what we do. You'd be able to do this, like, sure then, right? We're gonna talk about concepts, and when I get that that's obviously present, we're not having it be. But when you go, here are the rules we think is.
I'm gonna ask.
What do you think? Because that's what we're doing with development. Like, these are the rules. Tell us what you're
Councilwoman Sandals, as opposed to, I'm trying to like talk to
All these people up there are. I actually, trying to get.
We got a lot of noise.
Buildings from.
It's lots of guys. Staff doesn't want to do this now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.